Pod podcast. I'm your host, Super Joe Pardo, and today is a special episode. It's cold outside, but more so than just being cold outside here in the Northeast. I have a special episode. We're going live on a Saturday instead of the normal Sunday, because my guest today wasn't able to do the 8 p.m. The 8 p.m. Wednesday night time slot. So I was, I had to hook my man up and give him a slot that he could make reasonably because of where he is located in the world. And we will get to that in just a moment here. Let's see. I have a few things to announce real quick. If you haven't heard, Icon is, well, first I'll pop in where you're listening to from in the chat. In the chat window, I should be able to get it and throw it up here on the screen. If you haven't heard, Icon Indie PodCon is coming back to Atlantic City September 24th to the 26th, 2020. So you want to make sure you get your ticket while it is still cheap. You can make it even cheaper if you use discount code IPP. Yeah, you know me. When you go to indiepodcon.com/register. Real quick, we have a free webinar going on Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's called Monetize Your Podcast. It's with me and Samantha Riley, my previous guest here on the Indie podcast. And you can register at indiepodcon.com/monetize MYP. We're going to demystify, why you need sponsors, why you don't need sponsors, and some first steps for you to start monetizing your podcast. Should be a great time. We had a lot of interaction and a lot of great, just back and forth with our first one, Start Your Podcast. So I'm looking forward to doing this one. And Samantha Riley and I are also running the Monetize Your Podcast Mastermind and Retreat. Learn more at indiepodcon.com/retreat. If you're ready, if you already have the inklings of I gotta get monetized and I'm ready to take that next step, go to indiepodcon.com/retreat and learn how to build your business around your podcast. And now I'd like to get to introducing this week's guest, but this week's second guest. Everybody give it up for Yann Ilunga. Woo!
Joe, thank you so much for making an exception. I'm making an exception as well because I usually don't do interviews or things like that on weekends, but I'm excited to be here and happy that we found a time and date that would work for the both of us because 8 p.m. your time would be 3 a.m. my time, which would be quite hard for me to do.
Understandable, very understandable. In fact, at 3 a.m. my brain would be. I don't have anything to add to that. Next question. So what? Tell everybody about your podcast, your brand, your group. Like, what did it? Tell the people. What makes Yann?
Absolutely. Well, how long do I have to answer that question? No, well, jokes aside, as you said, I'm in a different part of the world, different time zone, different continent. And I'm also north because I'm based in Helsinki, Finland. So I'm already originally from the Italian-speaking part of Switzerland, and that's where this funny accent comes from because Italian is my mother tongue, but I've been living here in Helsinki, Finland for almost 8 years. Just like yourself, the guests and many of the people who are joining us here, whether it's live or by watching the replay, I'm a podcaster as well. I'm a podcasting consultant. I'm the host of a few different shows, and I'm also a speaker. The things I do work-wise is work with my consulting clients, helping them with the technical side of podcasting, if it's people that are just getting started, helping them with the marketing or monetization side of things, or the guesting side of things, because some people prefer to be or leverage podcasting as a medium from my side of the mic today, so as the guest. And then I also help people, and this is something I've started focusing on a lot more over the last few months, focus on creating and implementing systems for their podcasting workflow as well as for their business. So even people, some of my clients, for example, aren't podcasters, and systems are things that can be applied to podcasters as well to business owners who aren't podcasters. And then last thing you said, mention my group, mention my podcast. So very briefly, the two main podcasts I have right now, one which is actually my first podcast, the one I launched almost 5 years ago, is called the Jazz Spotlight, and it's a music business podcast. And then the other one, which is a show about podcasting, is called the Podcast Lab, and that's a show where I teach and discuss podcasting with a different format compared to other shows. And one of the things that I do that makes the show different is that every now and then I run a series of experiments on different podcasting related topics or aspects, and then I share the basically the results on the show. And then I usually also write pretty long blog posts where I really lay out every single aspect of the experiment. So why I decided to focus on that, what my hypotheses were, what the steps involved were, what the desired outcome was, and then what the actual end result was. And then the last thing, you mentioned my group. So I have a Facebook group which was dubbed Podcasting Community Do Join by Forbes, and it's called Podcast Growth Mastermind. And it's on Facebook. It's a closed group, but everybody is welcome to join, whether they are getting started with podcasting, they've been podcasting for a while, or they're podcast guests.
Whoa! Wow! All right, so that was a mouthful, and it was actually very welcomed because of the fact that apparently the technology side is only partially working at the moment. So
it's Saturday for the tech as well.
Yeah, clearly, like it's not waking up on time here, which really kind of stinks. So yeah, so I just got it shared in the Facebook group. So if you're just joining us from there, happy Saturday. And this is Yann over here, and I'm Super Joe Pardo. So, yeah, I hopefully all the tech end of it works. It is live streaming, and I just shared it manually into the group. So I don't know if that gives me the same organic reach that like going live into the group, or get like naturally does. I'm curious now to find out if this video doesn't hit as hard as the other past ones do, but so we'll see what happens. And either way, we're 7.5 minutes into this and we aren't turning back. So Yann, what does podcasting mean to you, man?
Well, for me personally, podcasting means the unique opportunity to do a few different things. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it wasn't for podcasting, whether it's work-wise, travel-wise as well, because speaking at conferences has brought me to places I hadn't been at before, like Australia. It's definitely one of them. Philadelphia, where you and I met in person for one of the editions of Podcast Movement. So I think for me personally, podcasting has been a tool that has opened many doors. And if I were to be even more specific with that, I would say that podcasting has been an incredible tool that I've leveraged to grow my network of contacts. And then those opportunities, those projects, and in some cases, some clients have come as a result of that network and those connections.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I think that sometimes gets overlooked when people are just getting started into the podcasting world. They don't necessarily realize like you're going to open yourself up to a whole world of people that you didn't know existed. They didn't know you existed, and opportunities just create themselves as that happens. So I think it's really important that people know about what they're getting themselves into on that level, rather than just thinking like, oh, I can create a podcast and it'll be fun because it'll be just me and my friends and we'll just be talking, or I'm going to create a podcast and I'm going to get a bunch of clients because of it, or I'm going to get sponsored because we're super fun, we're super funny. Like, but the people, the relationships, that to me is just as important, if not more important, than the money or the traveling or any of that stuff. So Yann, how did you get started with podcasting?
Great question. Well, the way I started with podcasting is I'm a person who could literally listen to music 24/7. I can follow asleep to music. I can sleep. I can listen to music all the time, and I kid you not, all the time. And some years ago, about almost 5 years ago, I was studying for, I think it was a university exam or something like that. And maybe for the first time in my life, I felt like I usually would have music in the background. And I felt, yeah, I don't want to have music or I don't want to listen to music, but I still would like to have something in the background. So I just did some random Google search and I came across a thing called podcasts. Had no idea what they were. Started to listen to one episode of a show. And then I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. Actually, the guest was Pat Flynn. And I said, this guy sounds interesting. So I went and listened to his own show. And then I started to listen to more podcasts. And then I said to myself, I think this is something I could do as well, because I'd been thinking for a while that I would like to do my own thing here in Finland. And when I came across podcasts, I was like, well, I think I could do that. And I was thinking, what angle can I enter the podcasting world from? And the best answer for me was to leverage the connections I had made in the music space, because I'd worked at a music festival called Jazz Ascona in Switzerland for a couple of years. And there, because I speak several languages, I got to interview musicians. So I had contacts and I said, yeah, I think starting from that space would allow me to easily interview people who are interesting for people to listen to, because I wouldn't consider myself somebody, or at least back then, where people would just tune in because it's me. And that's how I started. So the Jazz Spotlight was born as a result of that.
And yeah, so I think that's really important that you realize that there was a gateway for you to, it's not necessarily the end result, right? Not the destination, but the gateway to getting to the point where you felt comfortable on a microphone, felt comfortable interviewing other people, formulating questions, formulating thoughts, and like being entertaining at the same time. I think that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So when you got to had you come to America before, prior to coming to like podcast movement?
Yes, I had been I went to a conference in Denver to speak. It was an academic conference. It was the annual conference of the Association of Internet Researchers. So when I was doing my master's degree, or my graduate degree for those who are in North America, I actually presented a research I did with a professor of mine there in Denver. And since it was my first time in the States, I decided to combine traveling for the conference with pleasure. So I also, before going to Denver, I stopped in New York City. And after Denver, I visited California. So I went to San Diego, LA, and San Francisco. So podcast movement wasn't my first time, but podcast movement has brought me to new cities every time, because I hadn't been to Chicago before podcast movement, hadn't been to Philadelphia, and hadn't been to Orlando.
That's awesome. That I think getting involved, it brings so like another level of that, like meeting the people, getting to learn, getting to share your story, getting to broadcast your your experiences and your authority because of it, and all that. Like that's I think that's just it just adds so much to life, I would say, overall.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, especially if you don't mind me adding something, especially like in my case, where most of my clients aren't based in Helsinki or in Finland. So for me, those are opportunities. Podcast movement, for example, is an opportunity to connect in person with people that I wouldn't have the chance otherwise throughout the year. Obviously, yeah, we may meet at conferences, but they don't live, they're not neighbors of mine, basically.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that in my experience has really kind of stunk about growing a like more of a global audience rather than a like Philadelphia or Philadelphia, New York, or Philadelphia, Baltimore area audience, because like it's great like a couple times a year when I get we get people together, I go we get them at Indie PodCon, or I go to another conference or go somewhere else, But it just, in the in between times, there's not as many people, to get together. But with that said, and I didn't announce it earlier at the beginning, we are putting on, this is like a perfect, softball pitch in. We're putting together a Philadelphia podcast meetup that is taking place November 17th. It's going to be in Philly. It's going to be in the early afternoon, so like 1 or 2 o'clock in the city. We're looking at probably somewhere in like Center City, Philadelphia. And we're working on getting all the details together, working on getting the place where we're going to all meet up at. But there's a number of people that I've been able to, talk to and say, hey, like, we're going to do this. And so we're making it happen. So look for that event page on Facebook and on meetup.com. It'll be on meetup.com because there is a Philly podcaster meetup group that I recently just became one of the co-organizers for. So nice. So November 17th around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think we're going to have a speaker. There'll be more details soon. So just keep on the lookout for that. So thank you for softballing that in there for me there, Yann.
My pleasure.
What do you love about podcasting?
Well, there is many different things, but for me personally, I think podcasting is really a tool that, when used in a smart and strategic way, allows you to connect with people, or allows you to be virtually in front of people that you wouldn't be in front of otherwise. And it can be the guests, it can be the hosts, if you are the one who's a guest, as well as the audience.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, it's funny, like we record these things, like I'm in a room by myself, as I assume you probably are as well, right? And we record these things and there's nobody else around us, and yet we have an audience watching right now on across a couple different platforms. You might be listening to this podcast after the fact, where podcasts are served. And yet, like, we're not alone, but we are alone.
Right. Yeah.
But these interactions is what, it makes it so much more special than I would say than some of the other mediums that you could be involved in, like say blogging. Blogging, like, unless you're going somewhere else or you're going to sit in a coffee shop or something, I mean, you're around other people, but you're still basically alone. You're not really interacting with somebody else to do all the writing.
Yeah.
Do you do any blogging?
Yes, I do. So, I don't do it, for example, like some people do, like every day or things like that. I do write on my own website or my own blog. I do it also for some other people, sometimes guest posting. I've done a little bit of ghost writing as well. And I like writing. Actually, I have a background as a journalist. So that's probably where my interest for writing comes from. But I think podcasting is a completely different animal. And even if you host a solo show, for example, with the Podcast Lab, I have a hybrid podcast. So sometimes it's just me by myself. Sometimes it's me still by myself, but with the snippets, tips, insights from other experts. And that's something where I know some people, especially those who are starting with a solo show, they feel really weird because they say, well, I'm just talking to my wall or to my mirror or to my hand. And it feels so weird. And for me, the way I go about it and why it doesn't feel weird anymore is that I picture myself actually talking to a specific person. So then that's why when somebody listens to the show, it sounds or it comes across as conversational. And I feel that with writing, that's harder. It's a harder thing to do. And then there are certain aspects, for example, like my accent, it's something that makes me unique. And when I write, it's almost impossible to spot my accent. Actually, it is impossible to spot my accent. So with podcasting, I think there are certain characteristics that make you even more unique than, let's say, something like blogging, as we mentioned.
Well, I don't know, because like I feel like when I write, I'm writing to as if I was talking to someone, because I write in my voice. I try not to write like I don't know, like vanilla or bland
Yeah.
or like an instruction manual, you know.
Yeah, no, no, of course, I do it as well. But for example, for me, that type of writing I do, it often involves also like doing some research, getting screenshots and things like that. So as a process, I feel it's less. It's less personable in a way because I am basically wearing my head as a writer for a moment, and then the one as a research, and as a podcaster I do the same, but somehow basically the performance part, let's call it like that, it's the last part. So I do all the research and before, and then I bring my A game to the episode, the recording. Whereas when I write, I do a little bit of research before, but typically I start to write and then I say, okay, to here it makes sense to mention a specific research or to drop in a screenshot or something like that. So at least that's just my personal view, but I feel somehow that with podcasting, I feel more, yeah, more personable.
Well, you know, because it's hard to hear like sarcasm in writing, right? It's hard to
Yeah.
hear that like it. But with that said, like you bring up a good point. Like, okay, if I put in this screenshot here or I put in this GIF file here, like it adds humor to it. That's another layer of solidifying that like a human wrote this, because
Mhm.
there's nuance in it. You know, it's not just like,
Right.
hey, read the top 100 posts on this subject and just kind of puzzle piece something together, and an algorithm just does it. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's grammatically correct, but it's no life behind it. There's no
Mhm.
nuance behind it. There's no personality behind it.
Right.
Um, Other than like the 100 people that wrote the original article, assuming that people actually wrote those articles and it wasn't written by other other
Right.
algorithms. You know what I mean? Like turns into like a feedback loop here. Not that we couldn't do that with video or with audio, as we have deep fakes becoming a thing
Mhm.
where, you know, people are able to like make your face over my face, like I said
Right.
something. And yeah, it's actually kind of scary, because the telltale signs will be. But I mean, people said the same thing about photos, right? Like doctored
Mhm.
photos. It's a thing, and unfortunately, we're gonna have to be able to discern what's real and what's not.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and I think also from the uh, content consumption point of view, it's much more personable to listen to something or watch something than read something. I mean, it is a personable experience to read something, but when you can hear the person, it feels immediately like, oh, okay, you're part of the conversation or you're part of the experience. Whereas with the reading, you need to be more, it takes you more time to really get immersed, at least for me personally, to get immersed into whatever it is that you're reading. And it's also the case that, for example, usually I get immersed more when I read certain types of books, but I wouldn't necessarily feel like, oh, this is such an incredible experience if I'm reading, if I'm reading a blog post about, I don't know, something podcasting related.
And so what's one thing that you've done to help grow your influence, your like say your Facebook group or you know, your social media following to go along with your podcast?
Yeah, that's a. I think that's a question that everybody should really like, clean their ears and really listen to the answer. Right? And I think it all goes to strategic thinking. And I don't want to sound cliche, but I really, and I see it every week because every week I get pitches and stuff like that, and I can see how non-strategic people are while that they think, oh yeah, this is like perfect, and they aren't. So for example, when it comes to my podcast and then my business, because the two are related, one thing that has worked out very well has been to uh, look for people to, for example, to interview, like I did for a business show I used to run called the 360 Entrepreneur, not only because they are good fit for the show in terms of their expertise and everything, but also think beyond the show. So for example, for me, it's rare that I think, well, okay, this person is a good fit for the show and it stops there. Oftentimes I may think about, this person could be a very good fit also for my virtual summit, the podcast success summit. I see this person, it's somebody who has, for example, I don't know, a very engaged Facebook group. So you would be a good person to perhaps collaborate with in terms of a joint Facebook Live or something like that.
Mhm.
So for me, the one thing that has worked very well, and not only in terms of the growth of my podcast, but really in terms of also the growth of my business, has been thinking about my podcast strategically, leverage a podcast interview as the icebreaker and as the beginning of a possible collaboration. And then to answer the second part of your question, Joe, about my Facebook group, uh, today that we are recording, I think we are around 3,700 members, and everything has been organic. And obviously, Facebook helps you. So when people join, then boosts kind of the, how to say, the display of the group banner when people join other podcasting groups. But for me, the couple of things that have worked quite well, one has been to make the group different compared to other groups. So for example, I don't have any daily topic like, okay, today it's Saturday, let's swap reviews. Okay, today it's Monday, let's share an inspirational quote. No, I have a theme that we covered for a series of weeks or a couple of months. Can be podcast monetization, podcast guesting,
Mm.
content repurposing. So that's something that has been good because people know that, okay, right now we are covering this topic. And of course, questions related to other topics are welcome as well. But when it comes to basically what I teach, I say, okay, this is mainly what I'm going to focus on. And the second thing, or the other two things that I think have contributed to the growth of the group, one is to actually welcome members personally. So every now and then I have a post, usually with a funny GIF. Is it GIF or GIF, Joe?
I think it's supposed to be GIF, but I mean I say GIF.
Okay, well, a photo that moves, and then I tag, I don't know, maybe some 20, 30 new members, and I always give them the opportunity to mention the show or something because I have a no promotion policy in the group. And oh yeah, and actually that's been something that people have really appreciated because I try to do my best to keep the group promotion free. And yeah, so acknowledging people, tagging them, I think it's something that adds personal touch. And then every now and then I also try to answer questions. I can't answer every single question that people pop in the group or post in the group, but whenever I get the chance to do that, I see that people usually appreciate it, especially because I don't just answer just to say like, yeah, you're right, but even if it takes me a couple of minutes to answer and it's a relatively long answer, but people appreciate the effort. So I would say really it basically goes back to being really be mindful, be present, and be strategic in the way you approach your podcast, your Facebook group, and really anything you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you say strategic, what I'm hearing is personable. That's
What do you
that's
mean?
what I well because the way you answered that question is like, okay, how do I be personable and be available and be mindful that I want other people to interact and other people to be a part of it and be a part of the conversation, and then me be a part of the conversation as well, instead of just like, hey, I got this group, it's got a great name, come join, and like
No,
then it
but
just turns into a spam fest.
it's in a strategic way. So for example, why is there no day dedicated to promoting each other podcasts? Because that's not something that I know would contribute to my business. Some of the members of the group end up becoming clients. So for example, we cover the theme of the month, and then sometimes I have a Facebook Live that is kind of a recap of the key takeaways of the weeks or months that passed, and we covered a specific topic. And then usually I also maybe have a course related to the topic of the month or the team
Mm.
of the month, and then some people buy access to the course. So the way the course is structured, it is strategic in that it's organized that way because it has my group. It's a channel that I use for my business. So it's not just a
Right,
place
right.
where I'm like, well, okay, hey, let's talk about whatever. Let's you review my podcast, I review your podcast, and those kind of things.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely, and I love the fact that you have so much strategy built behind it, and people that are willing to still be a part of it, right? Like
Mhm.
it, and getting value out of it. So I think that's awesome. I think that definitely is right there is a lot of value that people need to, including myself, need to key in on and figure out how to build their strategy around the amount of people that they're bringing in and getting people to both interact, contribute, and ultimately I don't want to say pay their way, but like
Mhm.
but realistically, like if you stopped making a bunch of money from it, or even just money from it in general to pay for the time in which you're investing into it, it
Mhm.
starts to be like, should I be putting my time elsewhere? Right?
Yeah,
I mean, and that's
absolutely.
not just for you, Jan. That's for like that should be for anybody.
Yeah.
Unless you just
And
really, really enjoy it. At least at that point, you can say, well, this is my hobby, and that's okay because I already have income, or I already have other ways of making money, so it's not a big
Mhm.
deal for me to, because I just purely enjoy the hobbiness of it.
Yeah, and also depends what your goals are. For example, for me, as I said, it's a closed group, and I think the ratio of accepting declining member requests, it's probably something along the lines of 80% decline, 20% accept. So I am very, very kind of
Hmm.
strict because, as I said, the group, it's something I use for my business. It's something I use to foster a community. So I don't want everybody to be part of the group, and it's not really about the person per se, but for example, I ask 3 questions to people who request to join the group, and if somebody doesn't answer the questions, I'm like, well, why would I let you in the group if one of the prerequisites is to answer some questions, and it's not rocket science. And then also, if I see, for example, that somebody is like, oh yeah, it's podcast promoter on Fiverr, I'm like, yeah, I don't have time to let this person into the group and annoy the members, because then that has an impact on the group, which therefore then has an impact on me and my business. So I think
Yeah.
it's really about, if I wanted to say, well, I want my group to be something that displays my authority on a wider scale, I would say, okay, the more members I have, the better. But for me, it's like, I don't care. My group can grow with the pace it's growing, which is around maybe some 10 to 20 members per week.
Hmm.
And I'm happy with that, because for me, it's about the quality. And sometimes some of the members who are also members of other groups have said, yeah, this is one of the best groups, if not the best group, because I'm learning from it. It's a clean, safe space, and so forth.
So, why don't you want to plug the name of the group for
Yeah,
people to go
sure.
and find, and then figure out they can answer 3 questions?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called Podcast Growth Mastermind. Or if you want a link that is relatively easy to remember, I also have a redirect. So if you go to yannilunga.com/community. So that's YANNILUNGA. So yannilunga.com/community. And then you are redirected to the group there.
Awesome. Yeah,
And thank you, Joe, for asking and
of
giving me the
course.
opportunity to mention it.
Of course, if there's somebody out there that needs another opportunity to get their questions answered and figure out what they're trying to accomplish, because sometimes people don't know what they're exactly trying to accomplish. Definitely, definitely,
And may
definitely want
and
to.
may I add one tip for people
Of course.
it doesn't matter. You may be running your Facebook group or you're a member of Facebook groups. For me, what it's interesting is that sometimes there are people in my group who uh, may reach out to me and ask me, "Oh, I'm thinking of running a survey or something along those lines. Can I post it in your Facebook group?" And I'm thinking, well, the survey doesn't break the group rules, so that's fine. But I'm just thinking, if you are a person that isn't really active in the group and other members are regulars, they're gonna notice, okay, who is this person who's just basically, I've never seen him or her before and is just posting, hey, fill out my survey. And that it doesn't work. And I'm not surprised that then those kind of posts don't really get any engagement. For me, I've seen in my group, I have some posts that have a pretty crazy amount of engagement. And those are typically the posts that are about the actual group members. So, for
Mm.
example, things like, one of my favorite is, try to describe your latest podcast episode using nothing but emojis, and people go crazy. And for example, that's not a post that has an impact for my business, but that's a post that strengthened the community feeling in a way, and it's funny and it's light, and we need also those kind of things. But I would say to people, if you are a member of a Facebook group, or you are a Facebook group owner and you want to leverage the group strategically, then make sure that instead of just posting random stuff, actually you do the research, because a Facebook group can be an incredible uh, focus group for you to connect with. So you can even start to connect with people one on one, and maybe instead of posting your survey to the potential, in my case, I don't know, 3,700 members and get only a couple of replies, you can take a few minutes to go through the group members and say, okay, this person looks like a fit, this other person looks like a fit, and then you contact them privately, and you have an easy way to connect right from the get-go, because you can say, hey, I know we are both members of the Podcast Growth Mastermind, and then you start a conversation from there.
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely a great way, because you have all these people, and you put them in a position where they can interact together,
Mhm.
not feel so alone, and feel part of something bigger than themselves. Every like I said, we're sitting here alone, like two people, talking to each other, and then potentially interacting with people in the chat. So it's great to have that ability to like key in on people who are actually active and being a part of a community that's bigger than themselves.
Exactly. And actually, Joe, what you touched upon there is the reason why, for me, even though email is still important, email
Mhm.
marketing still works, but that's the reason why I'm putting a lot of emphasis on my Facebook group, is because with email marketing, it's me communicating with my community with a like unidirectional fashion. Whereas with the Facebook group, it's me communicating with people one on one, one to many, as well as people communicating with one another, which is very, very powerful. And sometimes people are like, oh, if I ask, oh, where are you based at? And people are like, oh, I'm here, I'm there. And people are like, oh, we are basically neighbors. And that's really powerful. So as you said, then people feel as if they're part of something bigger than just themselves, or just bigger than listening to a podcast, for example.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I know. So one of the first podcast I ever listened to was a Disney podcast back in
Mhm.
2005, and and for years I wanted to go to their reunion event where people had all these people come. They had them come down to Disney World and like spend like 3-4 days together doing like different attractions and different events and things like that. And it was it was like 2010, I think, or was the 2009, 2010 was the first year I got to go and partake in it. And it just was like, whoa, this is incredible. Like there's so many people and
Mhm.
they all get it and they're all together and we're having fun. And, I can't wait till next year. And it just grew and grew and grew until unfortunately they shut the show down back in like 2012, 13, something like that. Where they passed it off to another group of hosts.
Mhm.
But it was over at that point. The magic
Yeah.
was over. So I think there's a lot to be said, not just for people to be connected to you as the connector, but the people that are connecting because of you. I think is
Mhm.
really really important.
Yeah.
By the way, the way to say GIF is GIF, as I
Oh,
as I thought
Jeff.
it was, according to the creator. who says it's pronounced Jif like the peanut butter. He's the first article is from Gizmodo, and it says he's wrong, and I kind of agree because it's not Jift. You don't give a gift, you give
Right.
a gift, and that's yeah. So if he wanted it to be pronounced Jif, he should have named it
Yeah.
JIF, and JIF might have made sense because like JPEG, I don't know
True.
what
Yeah.
JPEG could have been the first letter, representing the first letter in the word or acronym. It's because graphic interchange format. It could have been JPEG interchange format, though I don't know that it actually is JPEGs. But he missed an opportunity to call it and do the thing that he wanted it to be. So let me see here. We really got to get you, Jan, to come out to Icon this upcoming year in 2020 in Atlantic City, because I'm not sure how familiar you are with the offering that. Are you familiar with the offering of Icon, which was formerly MapCon, for anyone who is
Yeah,
just
I
finding out?
mean, I remember we talked about it when we met in Philly. So
Mm-hmm.
I have a rough idea, and then obviously I've seen from the websites and some of the posts and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's what you meant with your question, but I think I have a pretty good idea of basically, or I would know what to expect basically from the event. That's what I would say.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so it's a one track conference. So there's only
Mhm.
one room. You get your own like desk set up basically because it's a classroom style setup. So it's nice and comfortable. It's a 2-day event this year with the first day on. So Thursday is a private classes. I'm running podcasting 101 and a monetize your podcast in the afternoon. So the morning is podcasting 101, afternoon is that the monetize your podcast. And then on Thursday night, I think we're going to have a private mixer party for our people, for early arrivals. All day Friday, from like 9 to 5, we have we're going to have speakers, workshops, and courses throughout the day. All going there. Everybody gets free headshots throughout Friday and Saturday. We have a
Nice.
photographer on, as part of our staff. Jeanette's been doing it for 5 years now, soon to be 6. With any luck. And so you're getting those free headshots, and on Saturday it's more, there's more workshops, more talks. We'll have lunch on Saturday. It's included with your ticket, which is something that not a lot of places do. We also include a free event T-shirt that's very high quality and very coveted. Every year, everybody is clamoring to get these shirts because they're very. It's not an event shirt like most event shirts where it's like, oh, here's the name of the conference and blah blah blah. Like it's a little more artistic, if you will. People are still wearing like 2005 or 2015 or no 2016, 17, 18, and now 19 shirts like all the time, and like sending me pictures of them wearing them, which is very it's an honor to me because I created them, so I very much love it. We're gonna have a Friday night party mixer as well. Like I said, Saturday has lunch, and right now the only ticket available at the moment is the plus ticket. It's $199, and if you go to indiepodcon.com/register and pop in promo code IPP, you can get yourself 10% off that ticket. It will not be cheaper than that, I promise you. And there's more to come. Like I'm actively working with a team this year of people, a committee. I mentioned this in the last episode, that we're working on a lot of different things. It's much more it's able to be much more expansive than it was in previous years, because of the team that we have in place and what we're looking to accomplish because of the added the added workforce. So it's all very much appreciated. So again, indiepodcon.com/register, pop in the code IPP, save 10% off. It's $199 at the moment. The courses will be available. Those tickets will be available in probably a month or two, for you to buy, your podcasting one. I don't know why you would want to buy a podcasting 101 course like almost a year in advance, but it won't be cheaper. That's for sure. It'll only go up once it actually does go live. But You never know, right? There's a butt for every seat, as we were saying before the podcast here, Jan. Um, so what's one thing that you don't like about podcasting, Jan?
You mean one thing that kind of I don't personally like about podcasting when it comes to me, or podcasting as an industry?
Um, yeah, I don't, just in general, like, what's one thing that you hate about podcasting? Like, it could be about the
Uh,
industry, it could be about like your microphone, it could be about
no,
literally
not
anything.
my mic at least. No. Well, yeah, there is one thing that really pisses me off. I can't. People always say, "Ah, you're such a nice guy," and yeah, I am a nice person. But there is one thing that makes my blood boil. I don't know if that's an expression in English, but
It is, it is.
okay, because in Italian it is. And I feel that unlike other spaces, other medium, people in podcasting, they don't have patience. I remember seeing a post in a Facebook group a couple of months ago where somebody was like, "Yeah, I started podcasting a couple of months ago. I'm not seeing the results I was expecting. I'm thinking about quitting. What do you guys think?" And I was like, "Are you for real?" You could ask anybody who has built an audience, whether it's been through in-person events, email marketing, newsletters, Facebook ads, whatever the channel, YouTube, it does take really time and hard work to build an audience. And I'm not talking about like a few months, I'm talking about several years. And I think that people somehow, I don't know why, but I feel as if podcasting, it feels as if many people are like, think it's like Magic Land, where yeah, you just snap your fingers and you're gonna have an audience. And sure, it doesn't matter the fact that you have never been in front of a microphone before, so your hosting skills suck. But yeah, you just think, well, because I'm me and I interview these interesting people, everybody's gonna show up and I'm gonna be the number one podcast in the world. And I find it very interesting and fascinating, but also really annoying because I I don't understand. Somehow I have a hard time understanding why for other things people somehow understand that it takes time, but then with podcasting I feel that people, yeah, maybe it's because people compare their chapter 1 with other people chapter 31. But I don't know, that's the one thing that I feel it's not so much about podcasting per se, but I see it happen over and over again in the podcasting space. And yeah, it's something that I can't stand because people say, no, yeah, it's a marathon and it's not a sprint, I know that. And then after a couple of months they're ready to quit because they say, well, such and such in a month got this many downloads and made this much money. And maybe they don't think that, well, this person came into podcasting after having been a blogger for 10 years. So it's not that this person started from scratch like maybe you are, but it's a person who started from scratch with maybe some 10,000 people from his blogging days. But yeah, those are small details that somehow people don't even like include in their thought process, which is like really crazy.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think it's real easy to overlook, that all that stuff. Plus, I think it's also easy to overlook the fact that like there's a butt for every seat, right? So your
Mhm.
personality, your hosting skills, your maybe not so much the audio quality unless it's really, really bad, makes a difference.
Mhm.
It's going to connect with some people. It's going to turn some people off. It's you just don't know. And maybe
Yeah.
that person's doing a ton of marketing too that you aren't
Mhm.
necessarily doing. So you're like, oh well, there's only like 200,000 active podcasts out there. Like that's like nothing, right? In the grand scheme of things, it just by osmosis I should be able to get tons of listeners.
Mhm.
And then there's also the people that are just like straight up lying about it.
Yeah.
That does affect people. I know I felt that way very early on back in 2014 and found out, like, I wrote a whole post about Twitter bombing. You remember that was a thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Uh
absolutely.
yeah, like that really pissed me off too because I'm like, I don't I'm not doing anything like that. And I, fine. If you want to do it for yourself, that's fine. But there was people that were like going out there and being like, I get 2 million downloads, 3
And
million
like
downloads a
teaching, I
month.
will teach you how to do it. I remember there was somebody who I think had
Yeah.
some kind of course on Twitter bombing, but like teaching it as a strategy. And actually, that's a good example because one of the experiments I did for the podcast lab, I think it was actually the very first experiment. Do you remember, Joe, the platform? It doesn't exist anymore. It called Thunderclap.
Yeah. Oh, Thunderclap doesn't exist anymore?
No, I'm not sure why. I think
Really?
it's been too bad.
Huh.
But basically, for people joining us here who don't know what Thunderclap was all about, it was basically a platform that you could use to create a sort of launch promotion. So you could,
Viral effect.
yeah, you could have your friends, colleagues, whoever sign up for your campaign, whether via I think it was Facebook and or Twitter, and then you would choose a message that would go out on a specific date and time you chose, and basically the message would be published uh, automatically from the accounts of the supporters of the campaign, or they could customize it however they want it. And because of this like Twitter bombing and the fact that people think, I want to have 1 million Twitter followers or whatever, my experiment was I showed people my Thunderclap campaign had a potential reach of over 500,000 people, which means that the people who supported the campaign had an audience that was over 500,000 people, so quite a big number.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to something. I don't remember the numbers at the top of my head, but I want to say to some 20 something listens. And I think it's really telling because sometimes we think, oh no, well, if I just get this much number, then the listens are a sure thing. And that experiment was just something that I did because I was curious, but also because I wanted to show people that hey, stay away from the just publish 100,000 times, interview people who have 1 million Twitter followers, ask them to share the episode, and you're gonna become the number one show on in the world. So that experiment I wanted to kind of dispel that in a way, and I hope I managed to do so.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point because that was one of the arguments for the whole Twitter bombing. It was like, well, if just 1% of the 2 million downloads a month is real, like that's still an astronomical number. And I'm like, yeah, but but that's the thing. It's like you do it in such a way that not only are you doing it, but you're trying to promote the fact that you're the number one because you got all these downloads that aren't even like necessarily real.
Yeah, and then especially I think where people somehow seem to get to lose their train of thoughts is that especially if you have a business related to your podcast, then you have to remember that you can get 5 million downloads with like shady strategies, and you think, well, now I can get the sponsors and blah blah blah. But at some point you're gonna get beaten because the sponsors are gonna see, well, this person always has these numbers, but the conversion rates are zero or are incredibly low. Or
Yeah.
sure, you're gonna have downloads, but then whenever you mention a product or service, nobody's gonna buy it, and you don't want that to happen. So Joe, I found the numbers. So the potential social reach of the experiment was almost 700,000 people, and oh no, I found the podcast episode. Let's see if I can find the post. But yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but it was something. Yeah, I think it was around 20, something like that. Definitely less
Even if
than
it was like
100 people.
100, like that's like or 500, like I
Yeah, you put
guess
it in
like how much work did you have to put
perspective.
in, right? Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
You put it in the numbers game and you say, is it really worth all that effort to get 500 downloads? And then the question is did the next episode go up? Does it have
Yeah.
a cascading effect where it's like, okay, cool, like that happened once. Now the next episode goes up like a little bit more than that, and then a little bit more than that, and a little bit like, is it start to trend up where it's like, okay, maybe if I do this same, do that strategy like 7, 8, 9 times, like, and my content's good enough, and I'm keeping the people around, then I can do it. But if to get like even 100 downloads,
56
like
downloads. It was 56. I just saw it now.
Wow, cool. But I'm sure that wasn't easy to get that many people to opt in to now a service that doesn't even exist anymore. It probably doesn't exist anymore. Thunderclap we're talking about because I don't remember having a pay structure for it. I thought it was
No, they had
they did.
a paid plan, but just some clarification: the 56 people weren't people who needed to sign up through Thunderclap. Those were people who saw either a tweet or a Facebook post by one of the people who supported the Thunderclap campaign for the launch of my podcast and decided to listen. So they didn't have to opt into anything. And well, if they don't have a podcast, or if at the time, if they didn't have a podcast listening app, maybe that's a thing they should have gotten. But
Mm.
otherwise, that's it. So there wasn't that much friction. But anyways, I think what I always tell people is you have to put things in perspective and remember where you're coming from. For example, it's very easy to shoot down now 56 downloads. But at the same time, if you have never been, for example, in front of an audience, you should ask yourself, okay, when is the last time I was on stage in front of 56 people? Or I was in front of 500 people. I think that's also the kind of the reverse, because I think sometimes people also, because of people throwing huge numbers out there, they don't forget, or they forget where they're coming from. So they say, well, I only get like 750 downloads an episode. And then I'm like, well, yeah, but if you
That's a
switch
that's still a
down,
pretty good number compared. I think like the average is like 200. If you're doing better than 200 downloads per episode, it's in that
well,
150 to 200 range. Like you're doing better than like
okay,
a large percentage of the podcasting community.
then let's say you're doing 190 per episode. And people are, well, but this podcaster is making millions of downloads. I'm like, well, yeah, but when is the last time you were in front of an audience of 190 people? Because I think instead of thinking about downloads only in terms of numbers, you should think about them in terms of people. And
Mhm.
then you would start to also get a sense of more responsibility, which leads then to better quality hosting, better content, and all those kind of things. And then if you do it consistently, at some point you are gonna start to see the results. But if you say, well, it's only 100 people, who cares? I publish on Monday, and then next time in 3 weeks on Friday, and then yeah, well, I usually it's an interview show, but this time I don't feel like doing an interview. People aren't gonna stick around. So I think it's also important for you, when you're thinking about your show and all those kind of things, always remember where you're coming from. And if you've never been in front of a microphone before, if you've never conducted or hosted a show, if you host an interview-based show, if you've never done interviews before, all those things matter. And remember that most of the podcasters nowadays are actually professionals, is celebrities, are people who worked at media companies. So if you're just a regular person, an independent podcaster like Joe and I are, and maybe this is your first time being outside of your shell, you need to remember that and keep that in perspective. So when you're getting 50 downloads, 56 downloads, take a moment to celebrate and say, okay, now I get 56. What can I do to go to get to 60, 70, 75, 100, 2000, whatever the number is, and then have the patience and put in the hard work, and you're going to start to see the results. But if you're just like, no, well, okay, what is the fastest way for me to get to like 10,000 downloads and an episode? Oh, well, yeah, I can like half-ass the hosting, and yeah, well, the audio quality, who cares? And all those kind of things, or do no marketing at all. It's not surprising then.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, yeah, thinking of it in terms of people, and how you can connect with more people on a level that people want to, because everybody has choices, right, with their content
Mhm.
consumption. They don't have to listen to you, unless you are the only person that has that podcast that is of that topic that they really, 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 really want to know about, and nobody else is talking about it. That's the kind of thing that captive audience, super niche, but for the most part, there's probably a competitor out there, and they have their own personality, and they're gonna connect with people on that level, and you have to think about it in that terms. And I think if you think about it as people, it depends on really. I think you hit on it earlier, Jan, with the whole, what's really your goal? Is your goal to get a bunch
Mhm.
of sponsors? Like, if that's your goal, that's great. I'm not a huge sponsory person for the most part because it's a lot of headache and work and
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. But if that's your goal, then yeah, you need all the butts in the seats that you can get, right?
Mhm.
But if you have a strategy and a plan around how can I take my, like Sam Riley, who we just interviewed back on Wednesday, she doesn't have the most downloads, but she makes money, like a ton of money, in the six-figure realm from her podcast because she's structured it and strategically planned it out so that she's getting people that are actively paying her for her services because of her show. Same with my
Mhm.
show. It's all about structuring it so people are interested in being working with you as a client versus like, oh, well, you're great, you're a listener. Have you heard about Purple, the bed maker yet? Like, that's it's all about your goal setting up and understanding like what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So
And also,
definitely.
sorry, Joe,
Yeah,
just
no,
to
go
add
ahead. Go
what you
ahead.
say, and I think it's also really about being strategic and also understand what are the things that you have control over and those that you have no control over. For example, if you want to get sponsors and you want to get as many downloads as possible, there is a lot of variables that you really have no control over, or your control is limited. But if, for example, you say, okay, my goal, let's say I'm a coach and I want people to go from listening to my podcast to becoming coaching clients of mine, then there is a lot that you have control over that you can structure in a way so that your podcast and steps you want people to take to go from listeners to clients are intertwined. So, for example, you can say, okay, the topics I cover very specific topics I'm an expert at and are topics I often talk about in my coaching sessions. I'm going to bring some of my clients as success stories, as case studies. I'm going to create sales funnels related to my podcast. So, all these are things that you actually have control over and you can work on and you can tweak and you can change that then actually lead to results. But if you say, well, I'm just going to try to get as many people as possible, there isn't really that much. For example, if one uses iPhone versus Android, that's already something that may be cutting you out, or some of your strategies may not be working for people who use Android, for people who use iOS devices. That's just a small example to show people that there are certain things that we absolutely have no control over. So it's worth taking a moment to think about what is it that you're currently doing with your podcast, and then think whether that's the way things should be, or perhaps there is something that you can tweak or change to basically better adjust your compass.
Hmm. No, absolutely. That's great advice, Jan. Um, so before we wrap up here, is there any last thoughts you'd like to leave on our audience here?
Well, first of all, I would say to everybody who hasn't gotten their ticket for the conference yet to make sure to grab yours. And yeah, I think what you're doing, Joe, it's actually something that people should really look at you as an example, because some of the things we talked about in this conversation, you are really a living example of that. So being able to attract people through a medium, whether it's podcast, whether it's Facebook Live, and then organize and gather those people in person, that's basically, I think, the most powerful way of displaying or showing influence. And I think it's
Mm.
something that all of us should kind of think about, even though, for example, I always say, even though I use technology all the time and I love it, sometimes it's nice, and it would be nice to be around people face to face. So I think the final things I would say here is for people to really take a moment to think about what they're currently doing, where they currently are, where they would like to where they would like to go, and start to think about ways to connect the dots. So, for example, if you have a podcast connected to your business, then make sure that the two are actually connected. Make decisions that are aligned with your podcast and with your business, because oftentimes there are people who say that their podcast is connected to their business, but they aren't really using it as a business asset. For example, if you're a digital marketing agency, I'm not sure that hosting an interview based podcast where you talk about business may be the best way for then segue listeners into becoming clients of your marketing agency. So it's important that you really think about what you're currently doing, where you would like to go to, think about things strategically, be patient, and then try to figure out how you can connect the dots between your podcast, your business, and other things you may be doing as well, like blogging and what's not with your business.
Yeah, no, I think that is excellent advice, because I think that a lot of times people get confused with what their strategy should be, who their, what their why is, and how they're going to make the correlation between. I mean, it's one of the reasons I changed the name of my show, right? But went from Dreamers Podcast to Business with Super Joe Pardo, is because it needed to change to be able to better identify with the people that I was connecting with, and the where I was heading with the clients that I was wanting to get. So it does make a lot of sense. Yann, thank you so much for taking the time out of your Saturday to come and sit down and have a conversation about podcasting and all of that. I really, really, really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Joe. Thank you so much. And can we try one thing? Since we started, I've been thinking, let's try to have a virtual high five. Let's see if I'm able to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you able? 1, 2, 3.
Oh, it's a little late. Hold on. Try again. Ready? One, 2, 3. Oh,
nice. I think it worked. Nice. No, jokes aside, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for what you do for the podcasting community. And yeah, really, everybody take Joe as an example and really try to implement some of the things that Joe has gone through, that other podcasters you may follow have gone through, and and have fun. That's also important, not to forget about having fun.
Yeah, don't stop having fun, because it's then it becomes a job, and nobody wants that. All right, Eric, thank you again, Yann. If you haven't gotten your ticket yet for Icon, you should go get it right now. I appreciate the softball in there, Yann, once again. Always serving it up. Go to indiepodcon.com/register. Use IPP as the discount code. The free webinar, free webinar, monetize your podcast, next Thursday. Me, Samantha Riley, 8 p.m. Eastern. indiepodcon.com/M as in Mary, Y as in yellow, or as in Yann, P as in podcast. To register. I'd love to see you there. It's going to be a great time. We had a great time last time. If you want to be a guest on the Indie Pod podcast, go to indiepodcon.com/guest and fill out the form. Pick a time. I don't think there's many left. I think we're running out of spots, actually, because I think I've only enabled people to go up until June 1st, because I don't know what my summer is going to look like, so I didn't want to over extenuate myself, but I think as we get a little bit closer to next year, I'll be opening up some more, as we closer to 2020, I will open up some more spots as the summer starts to become a little more clear to me. Let's see. And if you haven't joined our group and you want to know more about podcasting, go to join us in the group, because I'm reading off the thing below me. indiepodcon.com/group. Join our Facebook group. Have a great time. I hope everybody has a wonderful Saturday here. I was about to say Wednesday night, but a great Saturday, great Sunday, and I will see you all on Wednesday when I interview Mary Nichols. I think that time is not going to be 8:00. I think it's going to get bumped to either 9 or 7, because I actually had a conflict there. So it's going to be one of those times. It will happen. If not, it'll be another night, and I'll put a post out in the Facebook group. Everybody, have a great weekend. Thanks again, Yann. Take care.
Thank you.